Good morning. I'm Richard Powell, and I'm here to talk about why I support this congregation. Why I give not just my time, but why I pledge financially. And my goal is to inspire you to see your own pledge, your own financial support as an expression of what this place means to you in your life. So let's get to it. I pledge, putting it plainly, because this congregation is my home. It's my home away from home, in a time when the world looks, feels, and acts divided and mean-spirited and not like home. I really appreciate and need this place. I never thought I would need a church or a congregation or a sanctuary. Then again, I never thought I'd be living in the world I do today. When I walk into this place, I feel a promise, community that tries to live our commitment to love, justice, curiosity, and hope. I want this kind of place to exist for me, but also for my friends here, people who found us, and people who haven't found us, but will need to someday. I contribute because I've seen what it takes to keep this place humming. I helped with the 100-year celebration. I've been on the board, the executive team, the stewardship facilities team. All this showed me it isn't magic. It's volunteers. It's paid staff. It's a roof that doesn't leak, although it's leaked since the building was built. Heat that works, lights that turn on, and all the programs and the committees. My financial pledge is how I say, yes, I want this to keep going. For everyone. I want warm, dry offices for our staff that I don't have to put a bucket in when it's raining. I chip in because of what happens here every week. I want to keep sitting in the sanctuary with friends, hearing Marcia preach the kind of sermon that both comfort and inspire. I want RE to have the staff and the hours it needs so the kids and youth grow up with these values in their bones. I want Ray Hastings and our justice folks to have a base of operations as they push back against cruelty and indifference. When I pledge, I'm not just paying the bills. I'm investing in all of that and in history. And I'll tell you what I mean by history. About a month ago, it's a little more now, but the stewardship team sat around coming up with a theme for this year. That's what we do every year. And I had to bring up the eerie similarities between Nazi Germany and today. And you might not know that our role of our chalice played and what it meant, because during World War II, the flaming chalice was used by the Unitarian Service Committee. And I'm going to post this information in the back in the dome room over our lanyards. So check it out. But the chalice was designed in 1941 as a symbol of refuge, hope, and freedom for people fleeing Nazi persecution. Today, Trumpian values threaten basic freedoms, and our chalice reminds me that this sanctuary is not just a comfortable home away from home. It's a living sign of resistance and courage. My financial pledge is one way I help keep that flame burning for anyone who needs it. Lisa and I increased our pledge a couple of years ago, and we're grateful to be able to do so. We know that giving this way helps the church plan responsibly and meet its commitments with less anxiety, because steady, predictable income makes all the difference. So, imagine the kind of world you want, because your pledge helps build that world, both inside and outside these walls. I'm inviting you today to join me in making a financial pledge. Let's continue this honored tradition of guardianship for our friends, for our community, for freedoms at risk, and for hope. There's a clear line that runs from the past to today and to tomorrow. It's the arc of the universe, and it bends towards justice, but we have to help it. It runs through our chalice that shone for the persecuted in the 1940s, and it shines today as clearly. We are not done, and maybe we'll never be done. The UU chalice that kept the light of justice lit in 1941, and our current chalice that you can see now It's got an open circle to it. It was designed by Kay Bordoin as part of and that is part of our story today. We're not adjacent to history. We're making history. Let's keep the arc of the universe bending, if even ever so slightly, towards justice.
Sometimes you have two sermons that don't necessarily go well together, that both demand to be preached. The worst example was when there was this huge episode of gun violence that I don't even remember which one it was, which says something bad about our culture, on the Sunday that I was preaching about the Golden Girls. So the Golden Girls and gun control wound up being about the need for community and connection. This is the stewardship sermon. This is also compassionately 14 hours after I got home from Minneapolis. So I'm going to be really honest with you and tell you that part of the stewardship sermon was written in 2018 and edited this morning at about 9 a.m. And that the stuff about Minneapolis is just spilling out. On Friday of last week, March, which is an organization in Minneapolis that stands for the Multi-Faith, Anti-Racist, Change and Healing Coalition, put out a call for clergy to come to Minneapolis and support them during Operation Metro Surge, where 3,000 ICE officers have descended into a city that knows something about ICE. They put out this call to progressive clergy, and I say progressive clergy because they have core values of being pro-queer, pro-trans, and anti-racist. Those given, they are a true multi-faith coalition. And they said, this is Selma, folks. This is Selma. And they really don't want us to talk about numbers. So I will tell you that well over 600 clergy people from around the country answered that call. I will tell you that of that, significantly more than 600, 200 of us were Unitarian Universalists. We came together for a day of learning and a day of action, because just doing action doesn't give us anything to bring home. And one of the things that they really wanted us to do was bring stuff home. I will be honest with you and tell you 14 hours after I got home, I still got some learning to do about how to get that out. I need to connect with more local organizations that are doing some of that work here. I will tell you that I am incredibly proud of the work that they are doing in Minneapolis, and I am deeply ashamed as an American citizen that they have to be doing this. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories. Some of these stories you've heard on the news, some of them you probably haven't. We all know about Renee Good. And we all know about the lies that went out about how she was trying to ram someone with her car at a high rate of speed, which the video shows is just bullshit. We also know that so what I did not know is how brutally ICE is treating folks in Minneapolis. ICE has been here. We have heard some stories. We have not or at least I have not heard the depth of stories that are coming out of Minneapolis. So many schools have ICE agents surrounding them trying to get people who are dropping their kids off. People of color are being pulled out of cars before they ask if they're citizens or not. This government tells you that they are only going after vicious criminals and that this action is making us safer. If you're going after a vicious criminal, you know who it is you're stopping, and they don't know who it is they're stopping. They are going after brown people. They are just going after brown people. They are pulling people out of cars. They have decided that they can ram into people's homes and pull people out without warrants. One of the stories that I heard that was deeply painful was that so you have to understand, first of all, that Minneapolis is cold. On Friday, this day of action, the high was -9. I'm not used to that. They are used to that. But they are not used to the government breaking down the door of somebody's house and pulling out a 57-year-old Hmong man who is wearing boxer shorts and Crocs. This gentleman came from Laos under our government's amnesty program in 1974 and has been a naturalized citizen since 91. He has never committed a crime. He was pulled out of his house in his boxer shorts. His daughter managed to throw a blanket on him as they were taking him out of his house. Their reasoning was that there was a criminal who lived at that house years ago and they didn't realize he didn't live there anymore. And they said, well, you know, we gave him back, so it doesn't matter. It matters. I don't want to live in a world, I don't want to live in a nation where the government can pound my door down to take anybody out. I don't care what you've done, to be honest, pretty much. Nobody gets to pound your door down and steal you out in your underwear. There is another story about a 5-year-old in a blue hat. His name is Liam. And he was with his dad, and ICE took him and his dad, and ICE said that they were just trying to return him to his mother. But I want you to imagine that you are living in a city where your neighbors are being snatched up right and left. They are leaving children in cars when they are taking their parents. They are leaving kids at school with no one to pick them up. And they are stealing their parents. And they took Liam to the door and made him knock on the door and ask for his mom. And his mom didn't go out of the house. And they're like, well, it's her fault. You know, we had to take Liam and deport him to Texas within 6 hours with his father because his mom didn't answer the door because his mom had another baby inside and couldn't risk leaving that baby alone. On Thursday, when we gathered together for a day of learning, one of the presenters said, I'm sorry I'm late. I had to take breast milk to a 3-month-old whose mother was taken and left the baby at home. They left that baby at home when they stole her mother. This is not okay. This is not okay. I am not going to leave you here I am not going to leave you in this state. But I needed to tell you some of these stories so you understand why I felt I had to go. And I have to tell you some of these stories because I am inspired and hopeful because of the networks of mutuality and community care that they have going on in Minneapolis right now. Immigrants, legal or not, because this government doesn't care if you're legal or not. You can be following all the rules. You can have a social security card. You can have a date for your court hearing, and they don't care. If you're brown, they're going to take you anyway and ship you off to another state, at least. But there are networks on the ground there that are picking up children and taking them to school, that are bringing groceries to families who don't feel safe leaving their houses, who are supporting their neighbors. And there are those here too. Yes, yes. There was a story in the newspaper, of all things, because this isn't a story you hear a lot, but this is a story about a 12-year-old girl whose mom isn't around. I don't know where her mother is, but she lives with her dad. And her dad and this girl got her first period. And nobody could go out to get her pads. And they went through, like, she called one of her aunties, and her auntie called somebody else, and between like 5 people, somebody got this girl pads and explained to her what her period was. There are people who care. And one of the things that we need to do is make sure that the people who care, that the people who are responding, that the people who are doing that at the ultimate personal cost. Thank you, Alex, who was killed yesterday morning, who was out watching for ICE picking up his neighbors and blowing his whistle. And when he saw ICE attacking a woman, he, with his cell phone camera, walked over and is filming and tried to help the woman who had gotten pushed to the ground. He is trying to film. He is trying to pick this woman up. ICE tackles him, pepper sprays him, and they shoot him 10 times in the space of 10 seconds. The most horrific part of this story to me is, the story is horrific, but the most horrific part of the story is that instantly, okay, got to go back here, because Alex, whose last name I'm blanking on, P-E-T-T-I, Preddy, did have a gun holstered on his hip, was not touching the gun, never touched the gun. Open carry is legal in Minnesota. But in the same way that Philandro Castile, who told the officer that he had a gun when the officer stopped him, he said, "There's a gun in my car. I need you to know that," as I reach for my driver's license. And the officer shot him in front of his 4-year-old son in his back in the car. This happened years ago. Open carry doesn't just get to work for white people who are conservative. And so, yes, one of the things that the police did when they tackled him was they took the gun out of his hip and carried it away. The story that came out from this administration says that Alex Petty went in holding his gun, trying to kill as many federal agents as possible. Alex Petty never took his gun out. He tried to help a woman that ICE had shoved to the ground in negative 15-degree weather. Negative 20 is what it was yesterday at 9 o'clock in the morning. And the story that they are telling about that is that he was the aggressor, that he was trying to kill federal agents, and that the agents reacted defensively and instantly gave medical attention. This is not true. This is not true. A lot of truths these days are inconvenient. And sometimes doing the right thing is not the most convenient thing. Sometimes doing the right thing is not the most convenient thing. But as Peter Marty wrote, in our world of customized living, where a mobile device can instantly order out my preferences and bring most everything to my doorstep, church is also simply inconvenient. Church pulls me away from my self-designed life and requires that I take some initiative in another world that has nothing in common with doing whatever I please. Convenience also feels great, but it's not an unalloyed good. If I exercise only when it's convenient, or buy groceries only at the convenience store, or drink coffee only from paper cups, these choices do not make a good life. Inconveniences can hold their own deep value, especially when they ask us to experience a larger life than the one we typically design around our personal comfort. We are pulling in the stewardship sermon, well edited from 2018, because sometimes there are inconvenient truths, and sometimes we just have to do our best. Church is kind of like that. Floyd Rowell once said, "There are a lot of Sundays where I really don't feel like dragging myself out of bed and getting to church. It feels hard, but I've never regretted it when I'm there." And a former member once told me, "I always dread these evening meetings, and the later they are, the harder it is, and I grumble to myself and I show up. And then I'm always glad that I did, because this church is made up of good people all trying to do the right thing, and it makes me feel good to be a part of that." Today is the beginning of our stewardship drive, and again, it is an inconvenient time. I really just want to talk about mutual aid and caring for our neighbors and fighting authoritarianism, and we will talk more about that in 2 weeks. But we do have to pay for this place to run somehow. And just like almost every religious organization, we pay for it ourselves because it's no one else's job to do so. It is inconvenient to ask for money every year. It is inconvenient to admit that we have needs and to ask others to meet them. It is especially inconvenient for me, who in truth has to stand up here and admit that my salary is about a third of the church budget, my salary and benefits. Altogether, payroll taxes, professional expenses, total about $130,000. A third of that doesn't appear in my paycheck, and if it helps you, I make the same amount of money as a high school teacher in Portland Public Schools with a master's degree. Not crazy. I'm grateful for it. It's a good and decent income, and I am profoundly grateful for it. I am not, flying on my own private jet. And so it feels hard and inconvenient to stand up here and say, "Please pledge generously." But the congregation needs a minister. Worship is central to the life of the congregation, and crafting quality worship is mostly my responsibility in concert with our incredible musicians. Providing pastoral care is central to the life of the congregation, and also mostly my responsibility together with our congregational care team. I support the programs of the church and their successful administration. I work closely with the board and executive team, and I work together with all of our wonderful staff and many of our volunteers to help the church run smoothly, and what we do matters. I'm going to be very blunt for a few minutes, because a lot of times folks don't know what it takes to make a church run. It's this mystery. We don't quite understand it. You ask us for money. What does the money go for? What is it? Da, 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 da. So today, I will tell you that facilities accounts for the second largest chunk of our budget. About $80,000 covers the cost to provide utilities, insurance, cleaning, and a little money for maintenance of this gorgeous 1920s building, as well as for the new religious education wing. And our volunteers help us stretch that money a great deal, and we are profoundly grateful for them. Our mortgage on the new wing accounts for another $24,000 each year. Money well spent for our beautiful classrooms and the nursery that provides warm and bright spaces for our children and adult meetings. Our mortgage and new wing also made our congregation fully accessible for our congregants and visitors with mobility issues, because now we have an elevator. Our religious education program costs a little over $50,000. We have 63 children and youth registered. Our ratio of members to kids is the best in the state and one of the best in the country. Our director of religious education, Mary, coordinates with amazing volunteer teachers to run a high-quality program for our children and youth that passes on our values, supports our kids as they deal with questions about their religious faith, and encourages them to ask questions and explore. Administration accounts for just under $50,000, and this category includes salary and benefits for Vivian, our office administrator, as well as the office supplies, our phone lines, the computer lines, all those decidedly unsexy things. Our music program is just under $20,000, and a little less than that in dues to the Unitarian Universalist Association. About 70% of our budget is made up of pledges. Another 7% from the collection plate, with the balance raised by rentals and fundraising. And that means that this stewardship drive is really, really important. The stewardship drive is the only thing that once it's set, we don't have to work at. We don't have to find renters. We don't have to put on an auction. We don't have to sell holiday supplies or have another dinner event. We can count on that. And we need that. As a congregation, we believe that it's really important that we get the chance to decide what we pledge, and that each of us pledges something that we can afford and feel good about our contribution. On average, we need to raise more than $2,000 per member to make this congregation run. But even though it's not a padded budget, some of you who aren't as involved yet might be wondering why a congregation needs to exist at all. Why exactly do we do what we do? Isn't church something that they did in the 50s? We do what we do because we don't want to live in a world that is only convenient. Sure, for a moment, it might be nice to just sip our coffee out of a styrofoam cup, but those decisions are going to come back to haunt us. It might be easier to stay at home reading the paper, and some of you have figured out that you can stay at home and still come to church, and we're grateful for you. But the folks who are the most invested here will show you that showing up in person or online on Sunday morning or Wednesday night for choir practice or Thursday evening really does make them feel better. I know that the folks that I am able to keep in their homes because of the minister's discretionary fund are grateful. I know that people who come to tell me about their own hopes and dreams and fears and sorrows feel better because someone heard them. I know that families feel better knowing that somebody listened enough about their beloved relative to eulogize them well, and we come together and honor them. I know that our support of queer and trans children and youth and adult matters. I know that the 24 recovery groups that we host every single week matter. I know that when we bring casseroles to a person who is sick or a family with a member on hospice, they feel loved, which is another word for holy. I know that when a person comes in on a Sunday morning and really truly feels like they found a religious congregation that makes them feel less alone, and all those beliefs that they've had that have conflicted with what they've understood or heard about church, that they aren't crazy, that matters. I know the power of resistance in the world. We are living in dangerous times, my friend. Our country is becoming less civil and less just and less kind as its highest office is occupied by one seemingly dedicated to restoring rich white men to the only places of power in our society. That my job as your minister is not only to comfort the afflicted, but to afflict the comfortable. And honestly, my friends, most of us are pretty comfortable. And so my job is to remind all of us that just because we think the right things doesn't mean we do the right things. And my job is to keep calling us all, including myself, back into justice over and over again. To make you think and to convict you to act. Because it is too easy these days to give in to despair. And it is too easy to believe the government's constant lies about what is happening on the streets, to think that if it's not happening directly to us, it's not happening. And it is happening. Minneapolis is showing us it is coming for all of us. But Minneapolis is also showing us that there are so many ways to resist. 50,000 people marched in negative 15-degree weather in Minneapolis on Friday to say this is not okay. My favorite sign was one that says, "They are making the classic Nazi mistake of invading a winter people in wintertime." Yeah, we need to laugh, don't we? I got on a bus and walked up and down an immigrant neighborhood with so many stores that are closed because people are afraid to go out. I did a practice exercise where a dozen of us stood up in front of a couple of hundred people who were willing to go to the airport and risk arrest. And had 4 people come and yell at us. Now, this was safe because they didn't yell anything racist or homophobic or sexist at us, and they weren't allowed to touch us. So, it's safer. But it was fascinating to me because the person next door to me said, I knew it was safe, but I still felt this clutch of fear in my chest. And I have to tell you that I didn't. I felt so calm and centered in moral clarity. We know why we're here. We knew why we were there. We were there for those people who can't leave their homes safely. Our neighbors. We are there for those people who are protecting their neighbors and getting killed and being lied about. We are there for people of all faiths and no faiths who find something inside them that calls them to the moral clarity of this moment and says, do what you can do. people showing up and driving kids to school and bringing groceries and cold medicine and menstrual products to their neighbors. People walking around with whistles and cell phones because documentation is the only way to counter the lies. We are called, my friends. We are called by love to go out and do justly and love mercy and walk humbly with our God, which is just another word for love. We are called to drag our butts to church even if we'd rather be home in bed, because what we do matters. Because showing our kids that what we value matters. Because spending an hour or two a week stumbling together into being better people matters. Because becoming more kind, more just, and more compassionate matters. And because when love calls, we answer that call, my friends. No one is getting left behind this time. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.